Hey guys, happy Wednesday. I hope you're getting prepared for the massive long weekend that is about to ensue. Today marks the last day of the Keto Diet book tour, and I can't even comprehend how quick this has flown by. Thanks to everyone who came out to the book tour, and I can't wait to do it again. If you are new around these parts, my name is Leanne. I blog over at Healthful Pursuit, and this is another mini-sode of the Keto Diet Podcast. If you're like, mini-sode? What the heck is that? Basically, they're little short breaks in your week that are keto inspired. We're going to be chatting a lot about my personal experience with keto, what I'm struggling with, and what I'm finding inspiring on a week-to-week basis. Today, we're going to be chatting about the popular keto myths that float around that stop people from continuing on their ketogenic diet or starting a ketogenic diet. And this is based on a blog post and video that I created back in 2017. Now, I'm guessing that if you're listening to this episode, you might also be kind of new to keto. So I put together a little freebie that is a downloadable PDF to help with keto overwhelm. You can head on over to healthfulpursuit.com/free, and it goes through step-by-step how to start a ketogenic diet. It gives you some of the tools and tricks that I used when I was first getting started to really understand what to eat, what to avoid, testing, keto flu, all of that sort of stuff. So if you're new, that could be a really great resource for you. Again, it's healthfulpursuit.com/free. Also, I put together a little podcast extra and transcript, which you can get at healthfulpursuit.com/podcast/X4, and also includes all the links and everything that we covered in today's episode. Okay, so I'm about to share a bunch of resources and myths and things, and if you're not sure of the links, don't worry, I've put it all in that document that you can get at healthfulpursuit.com/podcast/X4. Okay, we have myth number 1, which is low-carb diets cause ketoacidosis. So ketoacidosis is also known as DKA, and it's a life-threatening condition that occurs in people who do not produce enough insulin, mostly type 1 diabetics and occasionally type 2 diabetics. When you don't produce necessary supplies of insulin, your blood can become too acidic. So this is dangerous, but it's nearly impossible for a non-diabetic person. Now, there is a caveat to that. If you have any abnormal physiological issues, I would definitely recommend chatting with a doctor just to make sure that you're given the thumbs up on eating a ketogenic diet. But generally speaking, non-diabetic people don't usually experience ketoacidosis. So if somebody comes up to you and says, oh my gosh, your low-carb diet is definitely going to cause ketoacidosis, it's just not even physically possible for that to happen to everybody, most people, in fact. Okay, myth number 2, your brain cannot function without carbs. Okay, so if this were true, humans would not exist anymore because there have been periods of time where we just don't have access to carbs in the past, so we would be extinct. So your brain does require a certain amount of glucose. It can function on ketones, but it does need glucose. And that glucose actually doesn't need to come from carbs. There's this really cool thing that your body does called gluconeogenesis, which literally means the making of new sugar, where protein or fat that we eat can be converted into glucose. So with that said, you actually don't need carbohydrates in order to function, but carbohydrates do come with their advantages, and I'll be the first keto person to say that I think it just needs to be a better balance, and we just have it out of balance. So I think what happens here is that people say, like, they go far off on the other side saying keto, blah, carbs are bad, I'm never going to eat carbs again, and that's not at all what I'm saying, or will probably never ever say. Okay, myth number 3, as eating cholesterol is bad because cholesterol is bad. So not all cholesterol is created equal, and it's sad that cholesterol has been given this bad reputation because it couldn't be more false. So cholesterol is actually made up of high-density lipoprotein, or HDL, and low-density lipoprotein, or LDL. The HDL is commonly known as the quote unquote good cholesterol because it takes what's commonly known as the bad cholesterol or the LDL out of your blood, preventing it from clogging your arteries. So there's an important distinction to make between LDL pattern A, which are large and fluffy, buoyant particles. They're not going to cause any issues. And then you have the LDL pattern B, which are small and dense. Now, the LDL pattern B are things that we want to watch for, but even pattern A versus pattern B, a lot of it comes down to genetics. So regardless of what you're eating, if your genes tell you that you're going to be creating more LDL pattern B, there's not much we can do about it. Okay, myth number 4 is eating cholesterol will give you high cholesterol. So cholesterol is what finally gave me my period back, keeps my hair shiny, my skin looking better than it has in a long time, and so many things. In a cholesterol feeding study in which volunteers ate 2 to 4 eggs per day, it actually showed the overwhelming majority of participants experienced very little impact on the overall cholesterol levels. And did you know that 75% of all the cholesterol in our body is produced by our liver, like naturally, without us having to do much of anything? So that tells us that genetics plays a role here as well. Okay, myth number 5, keto leads to nutrient deficiencies. Eating keto doesn't mean stuffing your face full of meat and only meat. And I think that that's like this huge misconception, especially with carnivore picking up pace right now, is that people get the two confused a lot, and it couldn't be more different. So I personally enjoy lots of wholesome, nutrient-dense vegetables on a daily basis. So it really depends on how you set up your keto life. But if you have a whole food-based nutritional ketogenic diet, you're still getting a lot of nutrients. In fact, in a lot of cases, way more nutrients because you're pairing your salads and things with actual fat. And those fat-soluble vitamins are going to be used by the body, where when you didn't have fat with them, they weren't used. Okay, myth number 6, keto causes kidney damage and or kidney stones. A recent study showed that the ketogenic diet may actually reverse kidney failure in people with type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And there are a few studies that have shown that kidney damage was associated with a very high protein ketogenic diet. Consuming such a large amount of protein flies in the face of what's suggested with the standard ketogenic eating style, which is anywhere between 15 to 30% of your overall intake coming from protein. Whereas a high protein diet can be anywhere from 60 to 80%. So we're talking about nearly double the protein. So in regards to kidney stone formation also, any risk can be easily avoided by proper hydration, green vegetable intake, and reduced protein consumption. Okay, myth number 7 is that keto leads to poor athletic performance. So at first, I definitely experienced that keto was not awesome for my athletic performance, and it took honestly, probably about 6 months until I felt really good. But at the 2-month mark, I felt pretty good and pretty on par. So the jury is still out on this one. And I wouldn't believe people if they were like, I have a definitive answer. One study found no difference in high intensity training between high carb athletes and ketogenic athletes. The same study also showed that ketogenic athletes experience less fatigue in low intensity training than their high carb counterparts. And I'm starting to see, and I hope you are too, that a lot of the world's top athletes are eating ketogenic, including professional football, basketball, rugby players. And there's a chance that a low-carb diet could actually help your athletic performance as well. So you know what? Just do you. And if it feels great, do it. If it doesn't, don't do it. Myth number 8 is that you'll lose muscle on a low-carb diet. So a true ketogenic diet will actually preserve your muscle mass. A meta-aggregation study published by the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that low-carb, high-fat diets not only lead to a greater loss of fat, but also a greater maintenance of lean muscle mass. Okay, myth number 9 is that ketosis is the same as starving yourself. So I think where people get confused is that because keto people don't eat a lot, it must mean that they're starving themselves because they're not eating the volume of food that a non-ketogenic person eats. And I think it's just a misconception. And also when we're starving, we have ketones. And when we're in ketosis, we have ketones. I really don't know where this comes from, but there's no actual scientific fact anywhere in this. Myth number 10 is you can't be vegan and do keto. That's like just so wrong. There are so many communities dedicated to vegan keto. And while I personally would probably never ever do it because I honestly hated being vegan, if I'm being true to myself, but I've met many women that have had great success with it and feel really fired up on it. So to each their own. Some of the best vegan fats that are also keto are going to be cacao butter, olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil, macadamia nut oil. Then for protein, you have things like tempeh, almonds, pecans, pumpkin seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds. And for vegetables, you have things like cauliflower, broccoli, spinach, Swiss chard, bok choy, cucumbers, sauerkraut. And if you want more about keto, veganism, and how awesome it could potentially be for you, I recorded an episode with Liz McDowell on this very podcast, episode 49. So you can just rewind on your podcast player to check that out. Or you can head on over to healthfulpursuit.com/podcast/E49. So those are the 10 myths. I hope that by dispelling some of these things, it will help you feel like you're making the right choices for your body and that you have some responses. If you're having a conversation with a friend that's just really curious about keto, I would highly, highly recommend that if somebody is challenging you on keto, to just walk away. I've never won any of those conversations. People will come at you, maybe not, with preconceived notions of what keto is, and you just can't change their mind. And I don't know about you, but I don't feel like wasting my energy. So I just don't entertain those sorts of conversations. But if you have a really curious friend, perhaps you can share this episode with them. Maybe they're thinking about keto, but they're not really sure how to go about it. And again, in those extra podcast materials that I put together at healthfulpursuit.com/podcast/X4, we'll have all the links to the studies and things that I mentioned if you really want to dig deep. Okay, I will see you next week. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Keto Diet Podcast. Join us again next Sunday to discover more keto for women secrets for your fat-fueled life. The Keto Diet Podcast, including show notes and links, provides information in respect to healthy living, recipes, nutrition, and diet, and is intended for informational purposes only. The information provided is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor is it to be confused as such. We cannot guarantee that the information provided on the Keto Diet Podcasts reflects the most up-to-date medical research. Information is provided without any representations or warranties of any kind. Please consult a qualified physician for medical advice, and always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health and nutrition program.